Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm going to grab your attention in the back of the room, if you don't mind. Hey, I love the conversations back there. All right, thank you. Okay, all right. So without further ado, I want to introduce the CEO and founder of Voicify. What I love about Voicify is it's a verb, and it's great. It's a descriptor of what people are doing with their platforms and their brands. So let's bring up Jeff McMahon, CEO of Voicify. Thank you, Jeff. Come on up.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it. Thanks, Pete. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. So wanted to talk a little bit today about some of the companies we're working with. We actually are constantly looking at the trends that are developing with our clients, and it turns out that we took a cut at this recently. A good number of our clients, if not a majority, are actually companies that are over 100 years old. And I thought that was really interesting because the folks that are really adopting this type of technology are actually companies that have been around for generations. So see if I can get this presentation going here. Okay, so before we jump into that, and I'm going to look at 3 industries and 3 companies that we're working with. We'll just take a quick look at what we're doing at Voicify to help you understand the lens through which we're evaluating some of these customers. So we have an end-to-end solution for creating intelligent voice assistants that can live really anywhere. The problems that we're solving really have to do with allowing companies like the ones we're going to talk about here to adopt voice technology more easily than having to build it natively themselves. All of these companies are global. They have a need for omni-channel distribution and for being able to moderate and create content rapidly, and that's really what the Voicify platform allows you to do. So everything from custom wake words, ASR, NLU. We have a great decision engine, sort of a voice CMS we call it. And then on the back half, you've really got text-to-speech. And one of the things that we do, I think, that's unique is we also have this concept of effects, which in addition to allowing companies to return an answer to a consumer, we can actually help them navigate their visual user interfaces. So if they're in a mobile app or a website or another device with a visual UI, you can actually control that with our system as well. So we'll get into a couple of different industries here. Again, this is the sort of deployed to any of these different locations, and you'll see why some of these are more relevant than others with quick serve restaurants, kiosks, things like that. So first one we're talking about is the automotive industry. We're working with Volkswagen, and I was just doing a little research and found that it was actually Carl Benz who came up with the first patented internal combustion engine driven vehicle. It looks a lot like the tricycle that my 4-year-old rides. And I don't think he would have thought back then, over 100 years ago, that they would be incorporating voice assistants into the modern version of that vehicle, but that is in fact what's happening. Every major automotive company is in a race to create the best possible voice assistant they can, and we'll get into why that is. So I think first, the concept of a connected car. Again, I don't think Carl Benz thought that there would be the internet or the concept of a connected car, but in fact, that's where we're at. All vehicles are connected, and companies are now thinking about how they talk to their consumers, not only within the vehicle, but outside the vehicle through a mobile app or any number of devices that connect not only the consumer to the vehicle itself, but to the brand. That's really become an important theme. There's so many functions that they're rolling out, and it's so rapid in terms of these refresh cycles where they're renewing models every couple of years that there's so many new features coming into each model that it's really overwhelming. If any of you have recently tried to use some of these functions, particularly on some of the screen-based vehicles you find in some of the new electric cars, it can get cumbersome. And so voice does become the optimal interface to do that. And then finally, because the adoption of voice has become so prolific, I think people are now comfortable using it as a means of communicating with, whether it's home automation or in this case vehicles. And so as you can see that last bullet point there, 60% of folks actually think that it'll influence whether or not they buy a vehicle. So these are some of the reasons and the trends why automotive customers are looking to voice user interface for their vehicles. So we're working specifically with Volkswagen. This example in their ID series of car. The ID4 is actually connected to 5 internal systems at Volkswagen. And I just make that point because we found in working with some of these larger global companies, the more systems you're connected to, the more data that you can service, the more utility you can provide to the end consumer. I think that's an important aspect of this. So one of the systems that we're integrated with is the system that actually controls some of the vehicle functions. So figuring out, in the case of an electric car, how many miles you have left, or where the closest charging station is, or maybe you can't remember if you locked your vehicle or not, so you can actually do that type of thing remotely. And some of the things that Volkswagen's also doing that I think is unique is they're putting their entire user manual through the voice assistant as well. So you can do things like, if you're on the side of the road and you have a flat tire, you can actually get sort of turn-by-turn directions that will help you walk through the process of changing a tire or oil or whatever it might be. So some of the results, I want to make sure we talk about how these companies are measuring success. 50% of app users are actually using the app once a week or more, and I think that's due to the utility of what they're putting on there. So the other major thing that initiative they're looking at really now is continuing to add even more functionality given how many folks are using it, and also deploying it to other systems. So right now, they've built their assistant on our platform. It resides in their Android, iOS app, web, in-vehicle, and soon we're actually going to be putting it in their global telephony system. So I think these large global companies are seeing the value of being able to have a single experience for the consumer that can live really anywhere that there's a consumer touch point. So the next industry that I want to talk about is the broadcast radio industry. Again, did a little bit of research in the space, and we're working with a company called Odyssey, formerly Entercom, second largest streaming broadcast company in the country. They own hundreds of radio stations, and they are the platform of choice for thousands more on top of that. So it turns out that in 1920, the first commercial license was issued to actually do a broadcast, and that first broadcast was announcing the live results of a presidential election between Warren Harding and James Cox. And why that's, I guess, particularly relevant is Odyssey ended up actually acquiring this station, KDKA, and so now is part of Odyssey. So that history really does go back over 100 years. I'm not sure if you can see this, but another interesting thing is the logo for KDKA 100 years ago was the Pioneer Broadcasting Station of the World, which I think is just really tells how big they thought that they were going to be. And we were thinking about adopting a similar logo ourselves. So there's a couple trends that are impacting the broadcast space. Number one is the competition from pure play players like Spotify and Pandora. And so there's been a tremendous pressure on some of the broadcast folks to increase their streaming capability and compete in terms of the functionality that some of those platforms have. And as many of you may know, Spotify, Pandora, and others have some voice assistant capability. So Odyssey, being a visionary and wanting to make sure they keep up, actually wanted to leapfrog what they were doing, and that's why they came to us to build their next generation assistant on our platform about a year ago. The other thing that's happening in media is just the absolute proliferation of content. That first station literally had the announcement of the election results. I imagine that was maybe 15 minutes, and that was the only broadcast on radio at that time, period. Even on that single station, there was just nothing else for the 24 hours. Now, as you all know, whether you're looking at content on your television or listening through a device, there's almost unlimited content. And these large companies that have been around forever have acquired a tremendous amount of content, and they want to make it easier for their consumers to surface that content, because maybe you're listening to, I'm from Boston, WEEI, the big sports station there. Maybe you're listening to that. That's owned by Odyssey, but Odyssey also owns a number of podcasts that I may not know about. So the voice assistant not only does player controls like play, stop, rewind, add to favorites, but it actually can start to get to know you and give you a more personalized experience as you interact with it. And then finally, smart speakers has almost really created a renewal in people listening to the radio, somewhat ironically. So there's all sorts of studies that show that folks who have an Alexa or Google device in their home actually listen to radio more so than people that just have a standard radio. So the ability to listen to, now that everything's streaming, not only your local station, but maybe you used to live in LA and now you're in Boston and you want to sort of have that connection to your hometown station or get the local flair from where you're from, that's caused a resurgence actually in broadcast radio. So the ability for these companies in the streaming radios or in the broadcast radio space to now stream those and have them go to different endpoints, particularly ones that are dominated by conversational AI, is really important. That's another reason why they've chosen to work with us. So again, Odyssey, I mean, just if you think again from that KDKA station, one single broadcast to now billions of annual podcasts being downloaded and hundreds of millions of monthly listeners, these companies that have really started off as visionaries, they continue to grow, they continue to evolve, and I think they're often overlooked relative to some of the newer big technology companies, but they actually are tremendous innovators. That's how they've survived, really. And so it's sort of early days with this recent edition of the Assistant, but just in the first day, 1% of folks were using it. By the end of the week, it was 10%. And broadly, studies in the industry show that companies in the streaming space that have voice assistants, about 50% of folks are using the assistant on a regular basis. That even sort of ties in with the last slide I showed you about Volkswagen, where about 50% of the folks are using it. So that's just going to continue to grow as more people get even more comfortable. But if you can have 50% of your users interacting with a voice assistant that gives them a superior, more personalized experience, it's a huge win. So the final, I guess, industry I'm going to talk about is the restaurant industry. I'm from Boston, and it turns out that the oldest continuous operating restaurant is the Union Oyster House, not too far from our office in Boston. Started in 1826. If you want to get technical, I guess the sort of worldwide title holder is Botín in Madrid, which has been around since 1725. Folks have been, the restaurants have been around for hundreds of years. They've evolved substantially. I don't think any of the folks who started these restaurants would have thought of quick serve restaurants and drive-throughs and people being able to order on their mobile app or through a conversational device. But that certainly, where things have evolved. So the pandemic, not surprisingly, has really impacted this space from a labor shortage perspective. There's all sorts of studies that show that customer service is really down in restaurants, particularly in quick serve restaurants, and it's a major problem that they're trying to solve. And I think it's actually driven a lot of the QSR players that have perhaps not taken a hard look at conversational AI 3-4 years ago to, in the last couple of years, really leaning into it as a way to create a better customer experience for their clientele and frankly, to sort of bridge the gap with this labor shortage issue. So we are working with a number of brands in the QSR space. Some of the things that we're working on that probably are obvious to folks, maybe you've even used some of these. Voice ordering, through our platform is faster, more accurate, more personalized food ordering. And that's a pretty easy one to understand the value. There's some other ones, though. We're working with some very large global players that I wasn't aware of how big the opportunity was around order resolution. So whether you called in through the telephone or no matter how you ordered, even if it was through a conversational AI device, if you're unsatisfied with your order, there's a lot of follow-up calls. They're currently coming in as phone calls to humans in these understaffed restaurants. And so being able to add a conversational AI that allows you to interact with the consumer in an empathetic way and get to a resolution that makes you happy is really important for all of these restaurants, and we're doing a number of things in that space. And then another one that was sort of surprising to me that has come along in the last couple of years, even beyond food ordering, is training. Because there's a labor shortage, there's a fairly high turnover, and so even if you've done an initial training with your workforce, if somebody is new and maybe they usually are making burgers, but they need to know how to make French fries, the ability to access that training real time through a headset or another device really becomes important. So those are some of the things that we are doing in the QSR space. It's a huge opportunity. 58% of folks say that any new technology, of consumers, any new technology really shows that a brand is customer service oriented. 20% of folks are very excited about using their voice, and I think that's going to continue to grow as people continue to get comfortable with it and have more trust. And then a very interesting one is also on the QSR side. Inaccuracies in orders is a major problem. As you can see here, about 22 orders per day per location are incorrect. And that roughly translates to about $51,000 a year, which in itself is a large number, but when you're talking about QSR chains that may have thousands and thousands of restaurants, you're talking about tens of millions and even hundreds of millions globally in savings by just getting those things right, with the, of course, added benefit of just making sure if you can get the accurate order correct the first time, not only do you save the money from an incorrect order, but you have more happy customers that are willing to return. So it turns out we looked at, we sort of highlighted three industries and companies that we're working with that are 100 plus years old, but as we did this recent survey of our existing customers, there's a host of other opportunities out there. And we're working with Johnson & Johnson, for example, in the pharmaceutical space. We have several healthcare customers. We've got Yale New Haven here, founded in 1886. I think the folks who started that hospital had no idea that we would be using conversational AI to book doctor's appointments and find out what the wait time is for an ER, and all sorts of things like that. Campari, the wine and spirits brand, started in Milan in 1860. And then even regional banks, everyone knows, for example, Bank of America and their Erica product, but we're working with a number of other banks, both money center banks and regional banks, that themselves have histories that go back 100 plus years. So it's not just in one particular case. I think the leaders in most industries these days have had a vision and a sort of trend towards being innovative, and that's led them to continue to adopt this type of technology. So it's not surprising that they're in fact on the forefront. So I guess to wrap up, I'll just leave you with a couple of things that we've noticed for working with some of these generational 100-plus-year-old companies in these very old industries as to where we found the most success and maybe some of the things they think about. So I think understanding the broad trends that are facing your industry and tailoring the technology you're using to specifically address those. So I think there's a lot of folks out there that they have innovation labs and they just want to be innovative, whatever that means, but they're not necessarily using the new technology to address a specific trend. Whereas the ones that we've seen be the most successful have very explicitly found the trends that they want to solve with conversational AI. Always, of course, keeping the customer and the customer experience at the forefront. The folks who don't do that have not generally done well in this particular case with conversational AI. We have mentioned some metrics here. So I think understanding how to measure success, whatever that is, initially it might be adoption, then it's usage and utility and cost savings, depending on the specific use case. Continue to iterate. Our best customers really have started with us years ago, and every year are adding new features and functions and finding new ways to use the technology, including deploying it out to other endpoints. So as an example, I think I mentioned that Volkswagen maybe started off with just doing in-vehicle or mobile, but they've expanded now to telephony and web and other areas as well, so that they can meet their customers wherever they are. I think also building a team and finding the right people in the company. These are generally very large companies. Finding the folks who are really passionate about innovation and getting it right has been a huge, for us, and sort of looking at our customers, has been one of the biggest points of success with the customers that end up doing the best with this technology. And then I think finding a partner that can let you do what you do best. So if you're a Volkswagen, you're about building the best possible vehicle, and you don't really want to get too bogged down with the details and too into the weeds of building a very sophisticated, complex conversational AI. Partner with folks like Voicify and other people here at the conference to focus on what you do best and yet still bring some of that new technology and innovation. So I guess with that, we'll wrap it up. I appreciate it. And Pete, thanks for having us. We're down at the exhibit hall, Voicify. We've got a booth, and a great team would love to chat with anyone who's interested in following up.
Thank you, Jeff. Let's give it up for Jeff McMahon. And thank you so much, Jeff. That was fabulous.